All right, everyone, I've got an amazing guest here. We've got Bert Sorin from Sorinex and Sorinex Outdoors. You guys might be familiar with the awesome gym builds that they do, and that's kind of what piqued my interest. And then I saw how much of a badass Bert was and wanted to get him on the podcast so he could talk to us a little bit about what he does and why the outdoors pulls him so much, and also kind of his journey through strength training, weightlifting. He's a college athlete. He's got a lot of stuff going on that he's accomplished. And so, Bert, I guess to start off, who are you for those that don't know who you are?
Thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate you having me on the show. I'm a guy who had a slow start, but I tend to not give up on things. I think that's probably a good way to put it. I have a limited basis of things that I'm probably better than average at, and most of those things are because I've done them for 10 years or more. So I'm a little bit of, I think if I could do it, most people could do it. I think I've succeeded in many times in life because whatever I like, I stick with it, and I go after it hard, and I don't expect success anytime soon. So I guess that's the esoteric answer. My name is Bert Sorin. I'm president and co-owner of Sorinex Exercise Equipment. That's a family-owned business. We've been around for 43 years. My father and I own it, and we just live in the world of strength and human performance. And in some ways, like Sorinex Outdoors is just a natural extension of, where strength. Sorinex was a natural extension of my dad, who was into strength and conditioning and loved weightlifting. Sorinex was also an extension for me, but then my dad and I are both into hunting and have been forever. So I started doing more Western style hunts and things like that, and I just was like, hey, I'm not in the sporting world anymore personally. And so I wanted to train for something, and training for a high desert mule deer hunt, I started looking at the physical requirements for it, and then things like that. So, well, gosh, I think there's a lot of people doing it well, and I think there's a lot of things that people could potentially do better, pulling back to my strength and conditioning basis and group of influence. And so that's where kind of the idea of Sorinex Outdoors was born, just as a natural progression of generally what I'm into. So.
Yeah, for sure.
That's kind of it. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. Try to be a friend to those people in my life, and it's kind of what I'm about. Simple.
Right. So it sounds like you've got a lot that you're balancing, and it's a constant balancing act. That's for sure. To be honest with you, it's really cool to me to see, because going personally for myself, I was never a college athlete, but constantly being involved in sports. And loving being in the gym. Just weightlifting has been a part of my life since junior high school, pretty much. And seeing how companies such as yourself and Phorm Outdoors and other companies along those lines are branching out and explaining to people, whether you're a whitetail hunter, whether you're a Western hunter, whatever kind of hunter you are, or even just to enjoy the outdoors more, it's really imperative to be able to be more mobile, to have more strength, do some weightlifting, do a little bit of cardio, get all of that mixed in so you can enjoy the outdoors for not just enjoy it more now, but also enjoy it for a longer period of time in your life, because you want to prolong life as long as possible. Sure. Enjoy your kids, your family, the outdoors, everything along those lines. So I love that was kind of a natural branching off of Sorinex for you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that's a good way to put it. I'm in love in two ways with the outdoors or with sports or with anything. I love the process, but I also love the product. The outcome, I think, sometimes there's a balance. Some people are about, let's say, the product of hunting will be the kill or the harvest or whatever you want to call it. And, some people are super hyper focused on, they got to fill a tag, or maybe it's even they got to get a buck or a bull, or maybe it's even a certain size or whatever that may be. And, I think it's become popular in some ways to kind of down that, if that makes sense, to say like, you shouldn't matter. It's always on the process. And the process, like, yeah, I get that, because we don't want to go so far into into like a trophy hunting only kind of thing, or, or like, hey, well, I'll do this at all costs. If I spend this much money, I could get this bull because this guy, whatever. Personally, I don't really care. If someone wants to spend $100,000 and hunt a private ranch and have a guy basically watch that bull for him all summer and call him and tell him, get your butt up here and shoot it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Like, seriously, if that's what you choose to do, fine. So that's product-based, as I would say. Then process-based would be going and doing the work. And then some people are like, I don't even care if I kill anything. I just like hunting. I go, oh, okay. In my opinion, that's kind of like we're playing a sport. We don't really keep score or care if we actually get a goal. Like, I think in reality, I personally believe you kind of got to be somewhere in the middle. You don't got to be. You don't got to do shit, really. But, you know, I guess what I prefer is to be in the middle. I set expectations relatively high for my success based on where I think my skill set is, or where I'm hunting, or where the area is, or whatever. I set realistic expectations, generally on the higher end of the expectation profile of that area, because I want to achieve something more difficult. And if I don't tag out, I'm pissed. And I think that's okay to be pissed. I enjoyed my hunt, but I also went after it with a goal in mind. And just like when I was throwing, I loved, or lifting, I loved weightlifting, I loved training, but you better know that I knew how much weight was on the bar. Like, I wasn't just like, I like exercising and moving around and expending energy. It's like, no, there was a goal in mind, you know? And so that's where I think it's a little bit of BS personally on both sides of the equation. People like, it has to be big or I'm not interested. Or other people like, I don't even care what I do. I'm going to take my bow for a hike. I'm like, well, interesting. So again, that's just my personal thing. So that's where I see the correlating parallels between that and sport. There's people that, yeah, I love training, I love all this stuff, but I like winning too. Like that. Yep. That's what makes the training, in my opinion, some of it enjoyable, because I think I wrote it one day, and I'll maybe I'll read it. Let me see how quickly I could find it. But basically, the concept of it was passion, and okay, so I'll read it. So I was hunting one day, and a buddy of mine, it was about me, but a buddy of mine hit me with, he was texting back and forth, and he was like, oh crap, yeah, I screwed up, I should have done this better, and I did something that I passed up a deer that probably I shouldn't have passed up. And then, you know, you're sitting in the stand going, gosh, I wish I had a redo of that last 10 seconds or whatever it is. And then, you know, and I was like, that's kind of a sissy thing to say, like, oh, I want to redo. And I was like, that's, and I thought about it. And again, and I caveat this, if you're sitting in a tree for 12 hours a day for a week straight, you go somewhat insane. So I end up taking notes about what I'm thinking. And so I wrote, it was basically on redos. I said, redos are okay. In fact, if you're truly passionate about something, you pray for redos. Everything else can be taken in stride, but your passion, redos are the juxtaposition of regret, expectation, and fantasy. If you lose, you long to have that day, play, or seconds back to try again. If you win, you do anything to ride that ride again. It's the addictive nature of passion. Every outcome propels you into the next challenge, faster and faster, until you are lost in a sea of flashbacks and flash forwards. And that's kind of how I view all my passions. You do them so much where, regardless of the outcome, you wish you had another chance to do it again. If you win, you're like, I want to hit that winning shot again. If you lose, give me another chance to make that shot again. So now I'm in flashbacks of thinking what I could have done better, and flash forwards in my planning and training phase to an extent where life just becomes back and forth, back and forth. You're just driving the ball forward, but you're always planning to how to make the best outcome. And the stuff in the middle is, in my opinion, what they call life. Like, that's kind of where I've landed on. So,
no,
sorry,
I love that. No, I love that, and thank you for sharing that. I mean, there's some, you know, I haven't sat for whitetail yet. That's something that I'll probably end up doing this year, but
You know, I can imagine poems and haikus and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I can imagine going a little insane sitting there, and you probably go through either so many books, or I hear so many different strategies that people have. And I can't, I'm not ADHD, but I can't sit still. And, you know, I'll be thinking about, man, I could be lifting weights right now, or I could be doing this. I could be bettering myself here, there, the other. And so I can only imagine, I'll probably be one of those people that takes notes as well. So that's cool that you shared one of those intimate moments. I appreciate that, because it's so true that, you know, we just that's why we keep going back. That's why even when we bow hike for a whole season, you know, and don't end up tagging out, we come back for more the next season and even more passionate and more fired up. I went through my own transition as well, where at first I was like, oh, it's okay if I don't tag out. And then I realized, like, my competitive nature after that one season of saying that, I was like, no, screw that. Like, I'm pissed, man. And even if it's a doe, I want to tag out. I want meat.
You want to have that phase where you learn and gather information and onboard, but after a while you're like, okay, let's take off the net or the training wheels. And in my opinion, that is like somewhat of an expectation. Like, let's take off the training wheels. That means, like, I expect to start having some success in some semblance of time now. And if you don't, you probably need to start changing strategy. Or I've seen people, like, they'll do the same exact thing every time, and I'm like, you don't see how you're hitting the wrong button each time. Like, it's so, after you hit the wrong, I have a buddy, he had a stand where he was getting bucks on it every day, except the day that he would hunt it. And he was just like, man, just kind of unlucky. And I go, maybe the wind's wrong for that spot. Every time you sit it, they don't come out. And every time you're not there, they're there. I don't know. Let's run the numbers.
I'd say you're the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's okay, but it's like, okay, then how do we solve that problem then? And that was the same thing with weightlifting or competing was, hey, every time I do this exercise above this percentage, my back goes. Then I'm stupid if I keep doing this, if I'm competing in a sport that I need my back to be intact. So you start tweaking things, but I think that's a part of the evaluation process that we have to have in everything we do, and be okay with, you know, I said, Brandon Lilly said, you know, don't remain dogmatic in the face of alternate information. Okay, well, at some point if I say, you know, Romanian deadlifts are the best exercise in the world, okay, great. But going to full range of motion all the way down to the ground, because that's what the exercise says it is, I learned after about the fourth back injury, my back doesn't like me doing that. So I go right until I start getting lumbar bend, and I'm fine. I can stay very strong, but without doing this. But I had to come to the realization to stop bashing my head against the same wall and just change something and then have a better result later. But that's the fun of it, right? That's the
Exactly. You know, and I'll be honest with you. So I coach my kids' teams, and this was during a soccer season, and that's kind of when I had the realization, because I was trying to do the whole, like, it's okay to not tag out kind of thing, kind of preach that message a little bit, like go out and enjoy it, enjoy the experience. And then it dawned on me when I had a kid, because the way I coach is, you know, you want to win, even at that age. I kept score, the kids keep score, they want to know the score, right? All the I can't say all of them, but most of the parents were like, oh, don't worry about it, it's okay, it was a good game. And I'm like, I want these 5 and 6 year olds to get better. Like, they're not going to be all-stars, but I want them to get better. And they naturally are competitive. And so they were asking me the score. They were sad when they lost. They were happy when they won. You know, it's a natural thing. And so I wanted to encourage that. Well, we were sitting there, and I want to say it was a halftime kind of little huddle thing. They were getting their oranges and water and stuff. And one of the kids asked, because we were beating the other team pretty bad. And so the kid was like, well, we can start playing a little bit nicer. And I looked at her, and one of the parents saw or heard me because their reaction was hilarious. But I looked at her and said, no. So you don't have to be jerks and rub it in their faces, because that's called being a sore winner. But I want you guys to get better. And if they're not playing up to that, then I'm sorry, but I want you guys to get better. And it kind of dawned on me after that in my own mind. It was funny how kids teach us stuff sometimes, where I was like, I need to apply that to hunting. Like, there's going to be people out there, a lot of people out there that are that are like, oh, it's okay if you don't tag out, or that participation trophy mindset, which I loathe. And I realized I was kind of preaching that. I was like, no, that's not okay. So
right, because the intent has to be to succeed. You might you could be, I wouldn't say okay with not succeeding. It's not all that it is, but in my opinion, you shouldn't be okay with it. There should always be an action step, that a different action step that follows it. Or if it wasn't really to score points in soccer, that literally changes the entire intent of the game. That changes the play structure, that changes the whole reason you have certain positions. It changes everything. So
you have a whole circle field. You don't need a rectangle field. You could just play in circles.
You don't need a goal. If that's what you're going to do, exactly. Like if that's the case, why am I even taking arrows with me? Like why do my broadheads need to be sharp? I don't know. It's just like, so you can't really play both cards too well. I shouldn't say that, but like you get what I'm saying. Like you kind of got to go, hey, I'm going to do everything in my legal power and effort to succeed. If I don't, what kept me from succeeding so I could win later? In my opinion. Again, people could very well disagree with me, but that's just how I see it.
No, definitely. And I mean, again, enjoy the process, but also you want to have that outcome. So I like what you're saying at the beginning as well about there needs to be some kind of middle ground where you're not just all in it for the outcome, but also you're not just all in it for the experience. Like there needs to be an in between, and just kind of finding that balance. Some people may be more driven by. Some people are driven by mass in antlers. Other people like points. Other people like how many tags they filled in a year. Like it's just it all like the success is defined by the person, and it varies. Because one thing that may get you going, an animal that you're like, oh, dude, that is amazing. For me, I may be like, nah, I highly doubt that at this point in my hunting career. Like anything with antlers, for me, I'm like, I should have worn my fill in the freezer shirt, because Wild Arrow makes one that's got a spike elk. And it's like, fill in the freezer,
that's so funny.
Or another one that's a doe, and it's got, like trophy ears. Look at those trophy ears. Like for me, that's like, as long as there's meat in the freezer, that makes me happy. Yeah. But,
and
eventually.
If that's the goal, then great. That's the goal. But I think everyone needs to be honest about what the goal is. I mean, we eat a lot of deer. I enjoy shooting does for food, but I'll be honest, I do it in the last week of the year because my intent and what I enjoy, what gives me the highest spike of adrenaline and dopamine, and then also what keeps me up at night, laying in bed, strategizing and figuring out ingress and egress places and wind conditions and thermals, ain't to shoot a doe. I'll just be honest. It's to walk up and grab some gnarly piece of bone that you can't get your hand around and go, holy cow, like this incredible animal and I are now sharing space and time that I figured out somehow to get us as close as possible, and this worked. Like, I get very excited about that. But I also, filling a freezer is, that needs to happen. So.
Exactly. But again, there's that balance, right? You're like, I know I can do that later. That's not what gets your heart pumping. What gets your heart pumping is all the strategy with the old buck or the bull, or if you're a sheep hunter, the sheep that you're going after, whatever it may be. So that's amazing. I wanted to kind of hear a little bit too, because this it definitely didn't end up going the route that I was thinking. I love having conversations like that because I get to learn things that I may not have learned before. But I want to know a little bit about your transition, because the outdoors, has that always been a big part of your life?
Yes.
Even from a young age?
Yeah. When I was 2 and 3 years old, my dad would take me fishing, and he would pretend that he got us lost, and I'd have to tell him how to get out of the woods. And I literally did it with my 6-year-old son the other day. We were scouting deer, and I was like, hey, buddy, Daddy doesn't know where he's going. How do we get out of here? And then, like, just to push him a little bit, and where he starts following deer trails, remember certain things. And I've been doing that since Pops had to pick me up over the mud puddles,
That's awesome.
And then, so I think I found last night it was pretty exciting, because I have some mounted deer heads that are just not what the class that I'll generally go after. I'll pass the size deer up all the time now in my life, but early on I'd mount them because it was like the biggest one I'd killed or whatever. And I found my first buck I was the kid. They're upstairs in the attic, and then the kids were like, "Hey, I want to put a deer head in my room." I was like, "Well, we got a couple up in the attic. You could, put up there." And I found my first one from October 11th, 1992. It says first buck, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool." And so, I look at an old picture of me. I'm a little kid, young and everything. I was like, man, I was just as excited about it then as I am at 46. I'm just more reps. I'm a little bit better at it. I have more opportunity. But I'm pretty happy that something that I couldn't stop thinking about at 14 or 15 years old, at 46, it's probably worse, if anything.
Right? It's gotten worse. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel very fortunate that the things I'm into. It's pretty simple. So.
Oh, for sure. So, and I want to ask about that because there's a lot of dads that listen to the podcast and are part of the audience. I love hearing how everyone either got experience getting into the outdoors, how their parents, got them into it, and then how you as a father are doing that as well. Because so just the example you gave, if I tried to pull that on my 8-year-old and say, hey dude, I'm lost, can you help us get out of the woods, he'd be like, Dad, really? That's kind of his reaction.
I'm not as your kids.
Yeah, well, I can't say that, but my son is going to be a future lawyer one day. He likes to argue everything, and he's a little too smart for his own good. But yeah, he would. Yeah. That's the reaction I would get. He's like, Dad, really? Come on. I know you're not lost.
My 8-year-old daughter would call me on it as well. Yeah, my 6-year-old little boy, I think he just likes playing along and thinks it's fun. So I think you got to do that move a little earlier.
Yeah. But how do you get your kids involved like that, for example, without the fights? Because I'm sure sometimes they just want to be at home. They don't want to get out in the cold, whatever. What are some strategies that you have that have worked?
Yeah, that's interesting because I've kind of, strangely enough, you would think that I've had a really easy go of it, being that, I hunt a good bit. My dad's a big hunter and collect, weapons and all the other stuff. I think how Pops did it with me was interesting. I saw the power of it. I think good storytelling is a huge part. Kids like stories, they like visualization. And I remember as a kid, I'd be driving around with my dad and he would just tell me hunting stories all the time. And so my little mind put value on that. I would hear these stories and I would hear these stories of adventure. And I was all into adventure stuff when I was a kid. So I wanted adventure also, and I held that in high regard and high value, courage and being brave and being tough and all the things that a little boy kind of wants to be. Those stories were illustrating those things. And of course, and in many little boys, they want to be like their dads. And so he imprinted that stuff where I wanted to have stories of, all these cool hunting stories. And so I just longed for that. So he would tell me the stories to where I could tell you every single one of those stories verbatim because I've heard them a million times. To actually what I asked. And so I'll even put it out there. I'm looking to have my dad tell all of his outdoor stories. And I want to find someone who will, he could just tell them the stories and they could dictate it and make a book. And that's what I want to leave, my dad to leave my kids, the story of their granddad, all of his wild stories, and as a gift to them. So I'm looking for an author that could write it up and edit it and stuff like that. So if someone listening, hit me up because I'm literally looking for this right now.
That's amazing.
So I've tried to do the same thing. So this past weekend we were in the cave and the boys are starting to get into hunting and so I'll back it up. So I told them a lot of stories. I showed them a lot of pictures. I'd buy books. We'd go over things and they got all into animals that way. And then I would take them on dates. So I'd take them on individuals. So I was like, hey, buddy, you got a date with Daddy today, or my daughter would, or whatever. So I would sometimes take them hunting. But you try to set them up for success where you're only sitting a short period of time. You have a high probability of seeing some things. You go out and eat a Cracker Barrel after that. And you make sure you paint their face, do all the fun stuff. You bring snacks. So try to make it positive experiences without too much, crazy. Thankfully, we were successful a few times, so they enjoyed that. But strangely enough, my 10-year-old, only probably 4 or 5 weeks ago, maybe less, he just told me one day, he's like, Daddy, I'm not really into hunting. I don't really like it. And my heart just sunk, and he's just like, yeah, and I'm not really into guns either. And I'm just I'm thinking wow, you couldn't have pulled me away from that as a kid. you know, and he literally put his arm on me. He's like, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm sorry. And I was like, no, we're good, man. I was like, hey, whatever you're into, as long as you're passionate about it and you go after it with full force, I'll support you in whatever. That's okay. But I asked, I said, why do you think, why do you feel that way? Just so I understand. And and it was interesting. He started saying stuff about well, the animals we're hunting are endangered and this and that and the other. And I go, okay, you've literally been fed misinformation. Mm-hmm. And then I started looking at some of the magazines and things that he were reading, and I hate to say that some of them were narrated in an anti-hunting, saying that just legitimate falsehoods, that there was a shortage of deer in South Carolina, and I'm like, wait, wow, it's like this is just pure lies that they're being told.
You want to call the car insurance companies and ask them about that,
Exactly. And so it was kind of interesting. We started talking about it, and he was like, well, I don't want to hunt. And I said, well, okay. But it was kind of funny. He's almost having a conversation with an anti-hunter adult I was having with my 10-year-old son who grew up. He eats deer or elk 6 days a week, which is bonkers because he loves it. I said, well, buddy, how do you think we get our burgers that you like so much? He was like, well, I mean, you don't have to hunt it. I go, how else are you going to get it? He was like, well, I mean, that's different. Hunting is different. Then you could see the tumblers falling in place. And he's like, what I've been told by whatever isn't accurate. So that was the first step. And then but he still kind of wasn't into it. And his little brother, I took him, I don't really care too much about duck hunting. I'm liking it now, but we have a little pond on our farm, and I knew some wood ducks were going in there. And anyway, so I took my littlest boy duck hunting one day. I said, let's go duck hunting. He thought it was pretty cool. He's my hunter. We went there. We killed a banded wood duck day one, which is, I assume, pretty rare. So anyway, we get that. We come home. The little boy, my little guy, is just losing his mind, thinks it's the coolest thing ever. He had a date with daddy. We had decoys. There's boots. There's splashing around. There's ducks. There's shotguns. There's blinds. There's we're forts, basically, the whole thing. So he sells it to his older brother. He's like, you got to go do this. This is great. You got to do it. So we take him the next week, and he thinks it's awesome. He loves it because there's action and there's this and that. And so what I learned was, he just didn't like deer hunting because he had to be scent free. He had to be quiet. I yelled at him when he was loud because he's a kid and he's constantly loud. So the stress level that I was putting on, unfortunately, was making him just not like it. And so he was like, this kind of sucks. But when duck hunting, you're there for an hour. You see the sun come up. They're splashing around. There's canoes. There's all the stuff a growing boy needs, And then we shoot some ducks, and we're sitting there laughing the whole time, eating candy bars, drinking coffee in the morning, all those things. And then so we get done with that, and he's like, duck hunting is awesome. And then he wants to stay, and he wants to build a blind, and he wants to do all this stuff. And then I take him, and we have a little tiny 22, and I put a red dot on it, and his eye is left eye dominant, so he was having a hard time seeing down an iron sight. And so that was frustrating for him every time I had him shoot, and he didn't like it. But I put that red dot on there, and then it was put it on the steel plate, let it rip. And then within 10 minutes, he was like, ka-ding, 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 ka-ding. And it was so the success came up. So in one day, he went from, I build forts and get to do all this cool stuff, and I could shoot this little gun. And at the end of the day, he's like, Daddy, can I get one of those guns? So I'm like, oh my gosh, 3 weeks ago you said you didn't like hunting, you didn't like guns. And now basically every weekend we're going and duck hunting and then shooting. And now he's like, okay, I want to get a hog gun. What can we shoot? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, at 11 years old, it just took the right experience and for me not to give up on it, and then to just keep curtailing it into, this is what trips your trigger on this. And maybe we won't deer hunt until you're older and you're quieter and all this other stuff. Maybe duck hunts and dove hunts and just going out and shooting cans is what they like to do, and that's fine. And it's not about me. I like big deer and stuff like that, big stuff that you got to be real quiet, big game hunting. But it's their voyage. It's not about me. And so that's what I'm kind of learning. Hey, if I got to put on a set of waders and splash around the water every Saturday morning with them, great. If I got to buy another 22 so he'll shoot, and he shot first 10 shots. He's like, Daddy, can I do it again? I said, buddy, I will load magazines all day for you if you want to do this. And he just kept going, getting faster and faster. Now it's he walked in the other night and he was asking me about different stuff. He's like, well, what's that gun? You know, what's this knife, and what's this over here, and well, what about that deer over there? And then so I got him some deer, and I put him mold deer and put them in their rooms. And so like literally within the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's like the interest levels ramped heavily. So I'm very, very excited. But you know, I just told the full story of how we did it, but I guess the answer is it's whatever it takes. Kind of like, you know, whatever each kid hits with, because my littlest boy, he was good with it from jump. You know, it was like, hey, let's go. Boom, we shot a doe. He's like, this is great. Let's go all the time. I was like, okay. But my older one that I really poured into trying to get him into it, he would rather talk about dinosaurs. So,
well, maybe you should take him alligator hunting.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that. I tried to pull a tag this year because I wanted to take him alligator hunting because I think he would have lost his mind, and he still will if he get to go. So they all agreed that they would shoot a hog. So now we're one step closer. So just you know, little micro steps. Because I mean, as my dad put it, you know, he told me years later. He said, "I never threw the football or threw the baseball with you because I knew or I felt that even if you played in high school, whatever, past 18 years old, you'd probably never pick it up again. And then what thing we had in common, it'd be lost at 18. Like, you know, he's like, I figured I'd get you into what I was into. That way I could have a hunting partner for the rest of my life. And I was like, that was good idea. Like the implementation of that was fantastic. You know, so exactly. I'm trying to make sure I throw the baseball and football with my son now because I think that's important, but also, you know, I want to make sure that, you know, when they're in college and they come home when they come home for Thanksgiving break, that they want to go out and, you know, get in a duck blind or sit in the stand with me, or go on, you know, later in life we go on hunts to Canada or Africa or wherever it is. Like, those are dreams I've had. Literally, I've had dreams of having sons and daughters that I could do the outdoors with since I was literally their age. When I was 10 years old, I thought, how awesome will it be when I get to do this with my kids one day? And so now I'm getting to live that out, the dream out. So I'm super pumped.
That's really awesome, man. And I really like hearing that. So, because a lot of people probably look at you and think, oh, he knows what he's doing, and which obviously you do, but that your kids would automatically be into it and they would just really enjoy it. And that's not the case for probably a lot of parents that hunt. And I think it's exactly, you hit the nail on the head. We don't even realize the pressure that we're putting on these kids to be quiet or this or that or the other. And I realized that too with Asher, you know, taking him out. And we don't necessarily have, I'm definitely not a bird hunter. But going out and, you know, I don't want to take him on these huge 3-4 mile hikes in to have to hike it all the way out for him just to look for animals, right? That's not something that you want to force an 8-year-old to do. But when I can go up on the bench up here, 10-minute drive, you know, we'll hike maybe half a mile and we'll sit him down with nice, you know, warm jacket and all this stuff. And he can listen to the turkeys, you know, and watch them with the binoculars, stuff like that, where it's interactive. That like flips his switch. He loves being able to be interactive. He's got ADHD out the worse, I think, than most boys, but most boys have it anyway, if you want to call it that. And so I think it's cool that you shared that, because I love that you didn't just get angry, get upset, because obviously those are your big passions, are hunting, lifting, shooting. And he was basically just like tapping the nail in the coffin there, just like hitting all of them for you.
All of them, yeah, exactly. But what I also realized, few things. I think you, like you said with him, you warm jacket, things like that. Like, I think you can associate another pleasantry with that thing, which is like, my kids learned that when we go hunting, we either get to go to Cracker Barrel or this little restaurant JC's, and they get biscuits and stuff after. So they attribute like Pavlovian response, like, this is going to be fun because I get to do this also, or I get to take snacks in the stand. And so like all this is like, okay, there's this little reward system that's going on, because I wanted to program a positive experience as that was happening. But what I also realized was I had been programming unwittingly a negative experience whether I took them hunting with me or not. When I took them hunting with me, The negative experience was I'm always in a hurry because I got 8 million things to do. So I'm like, okay, guys, get your boots. Where are your boots? I can't believe you don't know where your boots are. Dude, bring your binoculars. I got your binoculars. Where are they? You don't know where they are? And so, like, I realized I'm like, oh, I just yelled at them for 30 minutes because they're little idiot kids and they don't know where any of their stuff is. Then I was like, get in the car. Let's go. It's getting dark. We got to go. You know, and then they get there and then they're loud and I yell at them in the stand to be quiet. And I'm like, yeah, you're such a great dad, right? And then and it might be cool if we get a deer, then they get to like check it out and whatever. But I think they came to the realization was the stress wasn't worth the other side of it. Like the juice was not worth the squeeze for them. But then I hate to admit it, my passion pulled me away from home so many times. My oldest also told me, he goes, but yeah, during the fall, you always go hunting and you leave. So hunting to him was daddy leaves. So it sucks. And I was just like, oh crap. You know, I'm trying to like live out my dream, but also try to, you know, influence you guys to go chase your dreams and go dare to do mighty things. And I'll bring you with me and all these cool stories. And then my son was like, yeah, that's all cool and everything, but like you didn't hang out with me Sunday afternoon because you went and sat a stand. And I was like, yeah, but I asked you to go with me. He's like, yeah, but I didn't want to go. So then I'm like, okay, buddy, if you don't want to go, daddy's going to go. You know, it's November 15th. It's the rut. I'm going, you know. And then so he just saw it as it's either stressful or it sucks, you know. And I had to come to that realization. So that hurt because that wasn't a him problem. That was a me problem.
Yeah. And I've been there 100%. Even, you know, even just yesterday going out to shovel snow. You know, I gave him the option. I said, you can either go clean up downstairs or shovel snow. We had people coming over for my middle son's birthday, and so we just needed to clean up, you know, prep the house a little bit, and then I started to get into that, like, how do you not know where your boots are? What do you mean you don't know where your jacket is? Like, you're in your mind, you're like, I've told him a million times, the coat closet's here, the boots go here. So for this reason, we don't have to spend 30 minutes looking for your stuff, right? But it still happens regardless. And so I love that you pointed that out because I think that there's a lot of people out there. I know for me, it takes a step, you know, me taking a step back and realizing, look, maybe I just need to program an extra hour to half an hour before I really need to leave so that I'm not stressed because I want to get out there. Because in my mind, I understand either the sun's coming up or it's going down. That's not changing. You can't negotiate with that. And so to be able to program that extra time in, because you know that's more like that's something you can control is your emotions, your stress level, and putting that on the kids. I think that's so key. And I definitely notice a difference in my kids being able to get them out there nicely. We have good conversations on the drive over versus the quiet drive over because they're stressed and you're pissed and you're running late and they don't understand why you're mad and, you know, all that good stuff. So
yeah, and it's astounding that it took me so long to realize that. It's very embarrassing. It's interesting, something we've implemented recently. We usually get the kids out. They have to be out of the house like whatever 7:25. So we usually get them up at 6 o'clock. And so, and you know, as a guy, I'm sure much like you, I could take a shower, eat breakfast, and be out of the house in 8.5 minutes probably. Like it's ridiculous how fast guys can get ready. Although I also don't care what I look like, so that helps. So, but so we get the kids up at 6, and they're.
I was gonna say 3 of those minutes for you is the beard prep, right? Okay.
There is. That's just getting food out of it, basically. So we get them up at 6, and they're like always tired. They're always whining. Literally, my little boy will fall on the ground and start crying in his room because he's so tired, and it's this emotional event. And then they're jacking around, and it gets to the point where we're having to start barking at him. Get your this, get your that, and it creates the exact same situation as taking them hunting every single day. So I told my wife,
now they don't want to go to school. They don't want to learn. You know, school's a bad experience. Yep.
It's just sets us up for failure. And so I was like, all right. I told my wife, I was like, she's like, I think they just need more sleep. They need more sleep. They're just worn out. And I go, I'm getting them up at 5 tomorrow. And she was like, wait, no. I go, I don't know. I think that if we go way slower with an extra hour, I could literally play with them. We could wrestle on the floor. We could read a book. I could play Star Wars with them. We could talk. I could lay in their bed. One of them could read a story to me. I could like check in with my daughter, see what's going on. I think that will set us up for better success. Just kind of an hour to screw around as a family, and if it turns down the volume on the stress, I have a feeling there's going to be a better outcome. Mm-hmm. Immediately, the kids they're like, "Daddy, will you get me up again 5 o'clock in the morning?" And I'm like, "Okay." Next morning, we did it. Next morning, third morning, they need some sleep. We let them sleep till like 6:15. We got them up. All three of them were pissed. They're like, "You didn't get us up?" And I'm like, "Y'all need to sleep." They're like, "Yeah, but now we're going to have to rush." And I'm like, oh my gosh, a 6-year-old realized that extra time is valuable. So now, like, we're getting up earlier, but it's actually great. And my wife's like, well, what's going to happen? We're going to lose. I go, eventually everyone will just go to sleep earlier. Like, it'll hash out. But we're like in it right now where the kids are like wanting to get up earlier, which I thought is bonkers. And it all actually occurred from duck hunting, going back to that. So my little boy, we get him up at 6. He cries, freaks out, falls on the ground, loses his mind. We got up to go duck hunting at 5 a.m. I said, buddy, I'm going to wake you up at 5 a.m. We got to be quiet. We don't want to wake up your sister. This is a thing, like, this is big boy stuff. If you can't be a big boy, I'm not going to wake you up tomorrow morning. We're hunting. He's like, okay. And I didn't know how he was going to react. So I snuck into his room, and I just put my hand on his shoulder like that and just kind of pressed down just a little bit. Didn't even shake him, just pressed down. And he did like this and looked at me, and he just went. He looked straight in my eyes and went. Got down, put his clothes on, dead silent, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's special operators that don't get up like that for an op in the morning, you know. And then he was super cool downstairs, all of his stuff on. He'd already laid out, and I'm like, buddy. He goes, oh, I'm excited about duck hunting. I want to do this every day. I go. So it's the attitude, it's the what do you want to do scenario. And then one day, after a couple days of it, he was just like, if we just get up like we're going duck hunting, I'll get up fine. And I was like, all right, let's try to do it. Darn if that didn't solve it. It's just like, you've got to be kidding me that just getting up earlier is the key. And it might not be the key of people now, but right now that's the kind of the cheat code right now is, but we're actually having nice conversations at breakfast, and like no one's yelling at each other to get ready because there's a bunch of time. So I don't know, maybe that's something that other people have experienced to be a positive thing that they've done, or if you haven't, try it out. Let me know how it works, because I'm still trying to.
Well, no, and I mean Saturday. So we had gotten my mom loves penguins, and we've got the aquarium here in Salt Lake City. And so they've got a penguin feeding event that you could, purchase and whatever they give you the food for it. You can go sit down. The penguins come up, eat out of your hand, etc. And the kids were really excited. So we got it for, my mom, stepdad, and the kids. And so they were getting ready for it. And Asher, the 8-year-old, he just started breaking down, just like, I don't want to go. I don't want to this and that. And I just pulled him aside, pulled him into the office here, and I was like, dude, what's going on? Like, you were really excited about this. And he was like, I don't know, I just don't want to go. I said, are you feeling overwhelmed? He was like, yeah, Mom asked me to do 3 things in a row. And it was like, get your shoes, get your jacket, get a water bottle. Right. And for us, we're like, what do you mean you're overwhelmed? But like for him to just sit there and just like take a second and be like, I need to do one thing at a time. And for him, that's a big deal. And so, like, I was able to cue in on the fact that he felt overwhelmed, even though I don't necessarily feel that way about those 3 items, right? But for him, an 8-year-old, it's a big deal because he doesn't know where either of those 3 items are. So you just threw a big old, mountain of things to do on his plate when he thinks he's got like 2 seconds to get it done. And so,
so he has limited time to do something that he knows he has 3 opportunities to be yelled at for. That's probably how his little brain saw. He's like, okay, stressor getting yelled at, stressor getting yelled at, stressor getting yelled at, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Here it is. You start looking at it in those ways. You're like, oh man, you start decoding it. Wildly stressful.
Exactly. So that's crazy that you've got the same experience with your kids in different scenarios, because the mornings can be the same way, and I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that have that same experience. That's going to be gold for a lot of people out there, just to hear, maybe you got to get up a little bit earlier. You got to make that sacrifice as a parent if you're not already up early. I'm assuming you're an early riser. I don't necessarily like mornings, but I get up early so I can get my workout in before work, things like that. So, it's just kind of the necessary evil. But
what we're trying to do with that little period of time is to not always have it work, oriented, have it a little bit more kids oriented, where if they get up, like, I will play at least for 10 minutes with them on what they want to do. And so that little carrot dangling in front of them is like, hey, but here's the thing. If you lay in bed and you don't get up on time and we have to go down to the old thing, realize that 6:20, the stress train starts. So if you want to get up early, you can enjoy fun time. The stress train is starting at 6:20 regardless, or you could front load it and already be ready and everything. And then we just cruise right on into when we get in the car and, hey, isn't that fun?
Exactly.
So they're trying to start to program them for that. Which, again, we're still at ground zero, so we'll see.
Yeah, no, but that's awesome. That's cool. And I also liked that you were mentioning, when you were a kid, you pictured yourself with your own kids. That's something that, growing up, you always get asked, what do you want to be when you grow up and things like that. And, I had a list of, 5 things that I possibly wanted to be, which I'm none of them right now. And so didn't pan out on any of those. Yeah, well, so, I want to be a veterinarian. I want to be a pharmacist. And, what was the other thing? I don't even remember at this point. But it was something along the doctor route, Yeah,
you're way smarter than me. My things were a lot more idiot. I think as a professional skateboarder, a Viking, a ninja, a football player, and I think that's about it.
Well, you're a Viking and a ninja. You got the Viking beard, and you're a ninja in the woods. There you go.
And I make majority of my capital from football. So yeah, it worked out in that regard. And I still have a skateboard. So that's the kind of joke about it. Those are the first 4 things I ever wanted to be. And I'm like, I guess life turned out pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, I had those. And then I weeded out the veterinarian because I was like, if anyone brings in an abused dog, I would lose my shit. I would not be able to be professional about, I would take care of the dog and then I'd come out and beat the shit out of the owner. Cause I would not be able to, I just couldn't handle it. I don't know how people can handle that. But, stuff like that would just fly me off the handle. I didn't want to count pills all day. I didn't want to be behind a desk counting pills, as a pharmacist. Sure. And then, just didn't plan out. But I like the way that I am now so I can go out and enjoy the outdoors a lot more. Yeah. And then, of course, the podcast. I wouldn't have been able to start a podcast and chat with cool people like yourself and share these golden nuggets on how to be a better dad. But no, I did always know I wanted to be a dad. That was one thing that my dad was a great example of. He's a man, he's got his flaws, but he always showed me how to be a good husband and a good father. And so for me, I was couldn't necessarily picture my kids, but I always knew I was going to be a dad. That was a non-negotiable for me. So it's cool to hear that you're kind of the same way. So, it's, you've had quite the journey, and just kind of in a nutshell, you went from kind of being an okay athlete, and I heard your story on the elk
shit. That's a scratch.
Yeah, well, you were in college, right? You were saying an okay athlete in college in track, randomly.
I sucked basically in high school. I was at best okay in high school.
Which is still better than most people, but we'll say that.
Okay.
And then
I was I was okay at best. But anyway, and then in college I started out suck, and I ended up good.
Yeah, and you just you took doors. So just kind of the brief kind of overview of the story was you went into an open gym workout. And
it was not an open gym workout. It was that would actually sound like I was meant to be there, or welcome to be there.
You snuck into a gym that wasn't being checked very well.
It's like a breaking and entering isn't an open house. It's not an open house thing that is scheduled.
You took it as that though. It was an open invitation for you. That's
ish. So yeah, ish. Timestamp wasn't right, but no, my dad. I was in college and basically just screwing around, being an idiot, and we had built the weight room at South Carolina at the athletics, I called my dad. I said, hey, we built the weight room down there. Can I get in to work out? He called the strength coach. He said, yeah, as a favor, I'll let your son train after all the athletes are done. I think it was like 5 or 6 o'clock p.m. I'm 17 years old at the time. I'm a freshman in college, so you have like no concept of time or details. So that's where like the lack of like open invitation to like, I just was like eating a burrito. I'm like, I'm done. I'm going to go work out. So I just went down there like 2 o'clock, and 2 o'clock at a college athletic weight room is pretty busy. So I just cruised in there. It's first week, so no one like could. It's kind of like walking into a convention hall. Like you don't stick out, right? You look like everyone else. So I just walked over and started lifting weights, and no one asked me anything. I didn't have to check in. No one asked me to sign a waiver. Like it's literally like, if you think about it, that would be like walking into a stadium and like putting on pads and just running out into football practice. That's the equivalent of that. And you're like there for a while, and everyone's like, who is that guy? Like, why is he here? He just tackled someone. What is he doing? Like, that's kind of like that. So I'm just lifting weights and see some people standing in line. They're doing vertical jump testing, and it's like, that looks pretty cool. I'm gonna go try that. And I went over and did a vertical jump. They gave me a piece of paper too. It was like, oh,
I don't know why I can picture this. You with a like the burrito wrapper still. You're like finishing up your burrito, doing some curls. And you're like, oh yeah, that looks cool over there. Let me wipe my beard out and go jump. You know, like
there's like a stupid ride in a carnival that you don't have to like. I was like, okay, and they give me a thing, and I'm like, write my name on it, and then they, I raise my hand, and they do the thing. I do a jump, and he gives me my number. I write it down. I'm like, oh, cool. I just walk off with like this report card, not knowing what I was going to do with said report card. And then I go over, I'm bench pressing, and I look over, and they're doing body fat caliper testing again. So I'm like, that looks cool. I'm going to check that out.
Golly.
And again, no one called me on. Is that like how negligent we were in the 90s? Is that what that is? Like no one had any idea what was going on. So I walk over and I'm standing in line. I get to the guy, I hand him my sheet. I'm like, I don't know why I hand him my sheet. I assumed that's what I'm supposed to do. And he's like, all right, what sport are you? And I was like, and I totally made up. Like I was like, track and field. I'm going to walk on track and field in the spring. 100% lie. Like I just was saying this so this guy would stop talking to me. And he was like, oh, really? What event? And I'm like, why does this guy give a crap what event? Like, shot put and discus, like, because I'd done it in high school. I was not good at it, but at least I knew enough I could talk myself through it and out of him talking to me anymore. He goes, oh, yeah, how far did you throw? And I'm like, what the and I told him, and he's like, that's not very good. And I'm like, yeah, I know, it wasn't very good. And then he's like, all right, well, my name's Larry Judge. I'm the throws coach at South Carolina. And I'm like, oh, shit. In my head, I'm just like, one dude you couldn't have lied to. It would be like the equivalent of like walking into an archery event and like saying that you were like a bow hunter, and then like John Dudley's like, oh, hi, John Dudley, nice to meet you. Like you're like, oh, crap.
You're like, oh, man.
Yeah,
man.
exactly.
I picked the wrong guy.
Wrong guy to BS on this one. Yeah, and so anyway, he goes, all right, well, I'll see you tomorrow. And I was like, well, track's a spring sport. And he goes, well, no, it's not. Like, you're in college, and it starts tomorrow.
Train year-round.
Yeah, train year-round. You're in college now. I was like, oh, okay. And again, trying to BS, like, moonwalk my way out of it. I was like, all right, coach, well, I'll try to make it. And he just looks up and he goes, if you're going to be on the team, you will make it tomorrow. Like, this isn't like a, hey, I hope I see you around kind of thing, And I'm like, oh, right, okay, cool. And I just walked out the weight room. I finished my workout, walked out of the weight room, and that was before cell phones, or before I had one. So I went back to the dorm and called my dad on the landline. He's like, how's your workout? I was like, I think I joined the track team. And as they say, the rest is history, I guess. So
yeah,
that's how I ended up getting
Bert up. And
what's that?
I said you can go look yourself up now, and now you've got some records hanging over your head, right?
Crazy. Yeah, that's bonkers. So, yeah, that was my awesome recruiting trip.
Jeez.
And so, but I fell in love with it immediately. I fell in love with not only the process, but I fell in love with the product, because within 4 weeks, I'd already started hitting weightlifting because, you know, the fall is like heavy into lifting. As a thrower, you're lifting constantly. So I'd always wanted to be big and strong, but I was a late bloomer. So like I just wasn't growing. But now I was in college and I had all you could eat and I had this ridiculously difficult weightlifting routine. You know, I was a late bloomer, so puberty was starting to hit me harder. And so it's like every day I was putting on size and muscle. And so that was the product that I got addicted to. It's like, oh, if I just train and do all the right things and do it harder and harder and harder, the results come. This is the economy I started working off of in my mind, which that's why I still feel so strongly about track and field and throwing and training, because like it gave me everything. It gave me the realization of who I could be. It gave me, I could look at people and go, wow, that person is amazing and has something that I think is awesome. And then the only thing that separates me from that same scenario is just time and effort. And it's just the intensity of both, right? If I put a lot of effort in, the time is shortened. If I could only withstand this much effort because of my frame, my body, or whatever, it'll take longer, but I'll eventually get there. And so that started kind of accumulating in my mind. And, you know, my 5th year, I got my 4th All-American, I won the SEC championship, set a record, team captain, like all the stuff, right? All the stuff that like the Disney movie you would hope would happen in your life. I was able to ride that ride. I was able to go, wow, this shouldn't have happened. This was like, I mean, they called me Rudy because the movie Rudy had only come out like a year or two before. So they're like, I was like the little skinny dude that shouldn't have been there. And I was like, what if in the movie Rudy, he ended up like going to the NFL? Like that's the kind of the equivalent of what happened. I mean, I ended up going to 2 Olympic trials after that. So I look at it now, and I didn't realize at the time how absurd it was, but now I look at it and go, wow, that was absurd. I'm glad I didn't know what I didn't know, because at the time I just believed it was possible if I just kept doing it. But I also loved it so much. I loved the process of it so much that everything was on the table, and there wasn't enough information out there to tell me that it wasn't really possible. So, like, again, that's kind of how I look at everything, whether it's business or hunting or parenting or all that stuff, is like, well, my formatting software in the pivotal point of my life was a high duration of heavy effort will get you what you want. Got it. That's the operating system. So, yeah, that was everything. Walking into that weight room that one day and being curious enough to start doing vertical jumps and freaking body fat testing. It's so idiotic that, like, thankfully I'm just not very shy, or I probably wouldn't have happened, right? Even if everything else was the same and I wasn't as curious, that wouldn't have happened. If I was shy, that wouldn't have happened. It didn't have anything to do with the physical attributes. It was just, if I would have listened better and come in at 5 o'clock, it wouldn't have happened. Like, that's where I started looking at, like, how God had his hand on, like, I'm going to create this, all these planets are going to line up for you this day. And all these things are going to happen. And if you walk through these open doors, you will go on the journey of a lifetime. And it'll be incredible. And all these things will spring from this for the next 50 years. But you got to go on that journey. And I would have never in 100 years been able to write that story. And it's just, it's wild. Like, I feel so blessed that that's what occurred. If you roll that dice 100 more times, it doesn't come up that way. Hopefully something cool would have happened. I don't know. Maybe a better story. I don't know. But that's my story.
Yeah. No, for real. It's an incredible story because it's cool because all those things did line up. But also, I mean, you're willing to put in the effort, and you didn't just go in and just kind of show up. Once that door was opened, you were like, all right, I'm all in. And you recognize the effort that it took to get you to that higher level of achievement. And it's translated all through the rest of your life. I mean, you don't necessarily have to be as aggressive and, you know, as, I guess, I don't want to say not manly, because it is being manly, being a dad. But, like, you can't apply that aggression into the lessons that we talked about earlier with your son. But you also recognize you're able to take that same learning aspect of listening and just understanding that here's a door that's being opened, that he's going to remember these these things that you're teaching him about how to find the proper information on hunting or whatever, even if he still doesn't end up wanting to go and do it, he's going to have the information and know that Dad's not going to be upset when you go to him and say something contrary to what you know Dad loves. You know,
Right.
you're going to be there for him, and you're excelling at being a dad just as you excelled at being an athlete in South Carolina, and beyond, you know, into the Olympic trials and everything like that. It's incredible that how that has altered your life up to this point. And then you mentioned, just to kind of wrap it up here, there's so many other things I want to talk to you about, but I promised you an hour, so we've got
whatever it takes. What it takes.
well, you've got, I mean, and on top of that, you're achieving so many things with your beard. So, you know, but with being
I've only got it
for
caught in like 5 things today. It's great.
exactly right. So I don't think I'm going to go much further than this, because I can't imagine it blowing everywhere and like trying to draw your bow back. And
yours is still a functional length. Mine is like, I cut a foot off of it probably 3-4 months ago. If I sit down and it touches my belt buckle, it's that's when it has to get cut. Because then it's a functional issue of safety.
Jeez. I can't imagine you riding around in a side-by-side with it like...
Oh, it's so stupid at this point. Or in a boat, you're just like, it just sits in your face. Which I kind of find it funny at that point. And it feels nice to be this part. It gets a little wind under there.
What's that one? Was it Yosemite Sam or something that has like the beard and he has to like peel it open or something?
Oh yeah, I would do that when we were COVID and you had to wear masks and stuff. I would just take my beard and like put it into my hat, and I would just walk around like that with it, and just to piss people off. It was just stupid.
That's awesome. Well, what I was going to get to is that you were mentioning you're 46, mm-hmm. and I mean that's pretty impressive. I would have said maybe early 40s at the most, but the fact that you're still so functional, you're big into weightlifting, but you've transitioned your movement into more of that longevity style rather than trying to push your body past limits and build like you were at South Carolina. How, I guess just to kind of wrap that up, how would you say, I'm trying to think of the best way to ask this question here, but what would be the best recommendation that you have for people that are looking for longevity, whether that be even with the outdoors or with their family, but longevity speaking rather than trying to necessarily build up or be a bodybuilder or anything along those lines? What would be kind of some key tips that you would say for people, maybe even just getting into weightlifting at an older age?
I'm big on consistency over intensity these days. That for me, now I have to also take it, that's from my vantage point. My vantage point being one of an enormous base of weightlifting. And so I can't, I'm not foolish enough to say, hey, you could just do a little bit every week. Because sometimes my training sessions are 10 to 20 minutes. Very rarely are they over 40. And so, but I have to remember through the 90s and the 2000s, my sessions were 2.5 hours long with a lot of intensity. So I didn't lose a whole lot there. I'm still the same weight as I was when I threw hammer. So,
right.
And I'm actually leaner. I'm not nearly as functional or strong, but I think I found just a little drops of consistency for me at this age is much better. If I throw the intensity high or the volume high without a proper progression up to that, I almost always get hurt or overtrained. I'm not overly durable. I've just found I'm very effective if I'm not hurt. And I had to learn this in my sporting world. It's like my body has never been able to really put up with what my heart and my brain could do. Like I'll always over serve myself in the weight room. And so I've tried to learn like consistency. I'll do 5 20-minute workouts a week versus 3 hour-and-a-half ones, because I realize that I have a chance if I do those little 20s and I could move the ball down the field versus being hurt in 2 weeks. So I would use what I call streamlined hardship. So do basic movements. I do probably 50% of the volume that emotionally I want to do, if that makes sense. Now, I just know me. You know, some people you have to kick them in the butt to make them go. If I have ability to go, I'm going to go, but I know that. So I'll slow roll a lot of stuff for consistency's sake, because I see improvements when I stay consistent and when I eat well. Back in the day, I would eat everything in sight, but I was burning a zillion calories. So now if I eat clean, heavy protein, reduce the sugar, that's about the furthest I get into the diet world. It's just pretty simple at this point. If you look at something, you're like, I probably really shouldn't be eating this, like, you're right. You know, maybe I've oversimplified it, but like for me, when I go 5 to 6 scrambled eggs in the morning with my supplements, water, and coffee, and I don't eat carbs until noon or 1, my body does really well. It likes it. When I get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, it likes it. When every 10 or 12 days, if I could get a long, like a 9 or a 10 hour sleep in there to kind of catch up per se, my body responds. Like, but I would do that. I mean, in my opinion, you're gonna want to do big body movements that work for your body, squats, deadlifts, things like that. But I don't think the volume parameters that most people would program are generally correct for people our age. I think you'll overserve yourself.
Gotcha.
I think like the CrossFit model, it's a bit spicy. I like the idea of it, but when you start making something competitive, you lose the process. And in my opinion, I'm not saying a 46-year-old shouldn't be competitive, but the process is what puts the food on the table. You know, like right. We're all trying to develop strength, not exhibit strength, if that makes sense.
No, yeah.
So that's kind of how I look at it. I do some just basic stuff, and I'm doing more hypertrophy training these days, just because I found I could get a decent hormonal response while also keeping a decent amount of muscle on, without really frying my central nervous system that is already being taxed as a parent, as a business owner, all the other things. I just had to remember, like, heavy squats are going to hit my CNS in a similar way as a 12-hour workday and a conference, and stress at home and like all the other stuff. And stress is stress. You have to manage that stress. So
I like it. No, that's definitely and you are coming from you've got a big base. You know, a lot of people don't recognize that as well, that, you know, it all depends on little investments that you've put in over time, and now you've got a bigger base that you can build off of. But at the same time, I think it is key, those, you know, finding out what your goals are, because your goals right now are not to be in the Olympic trials. Your goals right now are, again, to be living longer, enjoying the outdoors, enjoying your family, running a business. You've got a bunch of other things going on, so you want to maintain strength, but like you said, not necessarily exhibit it like you did in your younger years when you were just eating whatever and going strength,
in a way, on my strength, I'm kind of living on interest right now. Like interest payment. I'm not really adding to the principal per se. Like I'm just kind of doing that. But then what I am doing, trying to consistently, is build my work capacity at lower level intensity, which is hiking, rucking, things like that, because that is more what I want to exhibit on an elk hunt or something along those lines. I mean, my sport was, you know, I lived 3 seconds at a time. Weightlifting and hammer throwing is 3 seconds or less. I was real good in that energy system. Unfortunately, that's the exact not energy system that I need to do what the things I want to do in life now. So I've just tried to transition that. But then there's definitely, there's the functional side and there's the ego side. I like being big and strong. I do. That's something I hold in high regard. So there's a part of me that doesn't want to fully let go of, you know, could I diet down and run all the time and be super, super lean and I'm 6'3", but can I be 6'3", 205? And I like 235. I'd rather be a lean 235. I just feel better. I mean, call it ego, call it image, call it whatever. Like, this is more who I want to be as a person, and I'll figure out how to make this work, just, you know, in the sport that I've chosen. So, I mean, I think people have to be realistic about themselves as well. Some people just like being bigger and stronger. Some people want to be able to run forever, and some people like, I don't care, as long as I can do whatever I want to do. I don't care what I look like, feel like, whatever. It's like, okay, cool. Then that's a part of the piece too. So,
well, for sure, definitely,
being realistic,
yeah. And
a big part.
Talking about running forever, I was just looking. So I've got a vision board over here, and my home gym that I want to build out is very similar to Cam Haynes' setup. I don't want the CHs all over my stuff, but yeah, but no, it's you know, and you guys built that out for him, you know, the Sorinex crew. Yeah. So for those people out there that don't know too much about Sorinex, I definitely recommend you go out and just Google Sorinex home gyms, and you'll see some of the most crazy, amazing setups. You've done them for John Dudley, Cameron Haynes, and many other people with some cool little twists to them.
We're actually building Patrick Mahomes' gym right now. It's in the right now.
That's awesome.
He got some neat stuff. So yeah, that's fun because then people are, you know, they want something super cool, and you get to flex a little bit on like the design, and you know, I enjoy those. And it's not that it's always has to be someone famous. It's just who's excited also about the art. I think we do strength art very well.
Oh yeah,
and that's kind of the form and the function meeting, you know, and so that part is fun. But yeah, going back to like Cameron Haynes, Cam's just a freak. Like, I mean, he just is. Like he is as he's built, man. Like some people are like, oh, he's not that tough. Or it's like, bull crap.
He's one of that
dude. That dude is an animal on the mountain. And I mean, I've run Mount Pisgah. I call it run because I ran some of it. He got done and then came back down the mountain and like walked up with me, and I thought I was, you know, dying. And I remember him looking at me, and he was just like, you wonder why I do this every day? And I'm like, yeah, this is ridiculous. He goes, if we rounded that next curve and the bull of a lifetime, a 400-inch bull standing at 70 yards, could you make the shot right now? And I was like, probably not. He goes, that's why I do this every day. And I go, got it. Okay, you have decided what you wanted to do in life, and you'll do it by any means necessary, and that's a beautiful thing. You know, exactly. He's extremely strong. He's a good shot. Like everything that Cam has gotten, you know, the legend of what his capabilities are. I haven't seen any smoke and mirrors on my end. So.
Yep. No, exactly. Well, I really appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much for hopping on here, sharing that. It seriously went a whole nother. I was not even planning on talking about kids and being a dad. It went on an awesome direction that I absolutely loved. A good little twist, and I think people are really going to enjoy the conversation that we had. If they want to look you up and kind of Sorinex stuff, but mainly yours and Sorinex Outdoors, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram pretty often. Bert Sorin, BertSorin. Sorinex, Sorinex. That's our like main page with our, you know, athletic stuff that we build, our big gym builds. And then Sorinex Outdoors, we have some content there, kind of merging those two worlds. Sorinex Squattober, if you want free programming during October, that's the worldwide squat party. It's been pretty cool. And then in December, we do Sorinex December, which is also free programming on deadlifts. And so we have a couple things out there that hopefully be assets for people.
Sweet. Awesome. I'll leave those links down below for everyone wanting to look them up. And again, thanks so much for being on here, man. Guys, like I always say, get out, live your life, and love it.
Thanks, Jonathan.